Okay, so we'll switch now to another pathogen. Again, it's a very, very important pathogen. Legionella, again, is another genus of bacteria. It is pathogenic. It does cause disease, but it's not. So it's not an indicator organism. We're not looking at this to indicate the presence of a certain type of contamination. We're looking specifically for the pathogen itself, because it is that pathogen which is going to cause disease, in some cases potentially fatal. It's a very fastidious organism. It has some specific requirements for certain nutrients such as cysteine, iron. It doesn't grow on blood agar, and I'll come back to that in a little while. And it does grow extremely slowly compared to other bacteria. Legionella survive very well within a water network, and it's because it's very good at associating with what's called biofilm. It does this because it replicates its natural environment, and we'll see that a little bit more. It can naturally, even in its free-living form, survive relatively high temperatures, and it can survive relatively low pHs. And it becomes hazardous when it's aerosolized. The Legionella genus is ever-changing and growing. It's pretty big. There are over 60 species of Legionella bacteria within the genus. It is constantly changing. All have been detected within water systems using some method or another, but not all species are causative of disease. They're often, and I can attest to this, they're often very biochemically distinct. Some of them will fluoresce, some of them will grow on a particular type of agar, some of them will not. So the methods have to be quite broad to be able to detect the majority of this genus. It is very hard to control, so it can withstand very low pHs for extended periods, and it can survive fairly high temperatures for extended amounts of time. So even if we're in situations where we're trying to control these physical parameters, you can still get Legionella bacteria proliferating in that situation, particularly if it's associated with biofilm. It can also travel long distances. Once it's aerosolized, it can travel up to 3 miles, and that's an estimate. Obviously, it's going to depend on a lot of factors. But if you have a cooling tower that's pumping out aerosols containing Legionella, that can travel pretty quickly within the environment. To start focusing a little bit on Legionnaires disease, there was a meeting back in the 1970s of the American Legion. They were all staying in the same hotel. A lot of people became ill, and there were a number of fatalities from this. It took them another year to try and identify the causative agent for Legionnaires disease. And that's because it is fastidious. It's difficult to grow. One of our stock nutrient agars in the lab is blood agar, and it doesn't grow on it. So they had to go through a lot of detective work to be able to figure out what was causing this problem. We have to be specific when we talk about Legionnaires disease. There are a lot of infections, we generally just call them Legionelloses, which are caused by the genus Legionella. Legionnaires disease is probably the most important. It is the one that can be fatal. There are other less severe infections such as Pontiac fever. It's generally self-limiting within hours or days. It rarely kills people. And there are other infections such as skin infections, but again, they're very rarely fatal. Legionnaires disease is extremely important, and it can kill, and does. And it does it because this is part of its life cycle. Legionella like to infect free-living amoebae. They just occur naturally within the environment. Because it does that, it loves to associate with biofilm. The biofilm is a similar environment to these environmental free-living Legionellae. It produces these nice exopolysaccharides which help protect it And so it loves to be in this biofilm, and that biofilm helps to protect it. Similarly, within your lung, you have certain types of cells called erythrocytes, and they're very similar to these free-living protozoa, and the Legionella will quite happily infect those cells, and that's when it becomes a problem, and that's when infection with certain species of Legionella can cause Legionnaires disease. And we know that Legionnaires disease is increasing for many, many reasons. We do travel more. And I think I mentioned it earlier, I travelled 30 hours to be here, so that's good, but we are integrated more. We're a global society now, we're not isolating ourselves particularly. Also, our environment is very, very complex, and we're interacting with that environment a lot more. The infrastructure within that environment is getting older, and we're just living longer. So we start to move into those risk groups where becoming infected with Legionella and developing some form of Legionellosis or Legionnaires disease can become more probable. If we focus on Legionnaires disease and we look specifically at that, this is some data, and obviously the report is indicated here. We look at the causative agent. The vast majority of cases of Legionnaires disease that are confirmed are caused by Legionella pneumophila. There are a few other species which can be implicated in infections, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later. But if we specifically focus on Legionnaires disease, the number one causative agent, very high 90 percentile, is Legionella pneumophila. And just to add another small bit of data, this is data from Public Health England from between 2014 and 16. 1,070 confirmed cases. So this is somebody who's turned up to hospital, they've gone through a bronchial lavage or some other test, and that's been cultured. They've found Legionella pneumophila in 99.7% of cases. So it's pretty clear in terms of this potentially fatal disease, Legionella pneumophila is the number one cause.